Hello, my name's Eliza. On my wedding day, my sister showed up late, threw her drink, smashed my cake, and screamed in front of everyone. My dad? He hugged her and said, "Let her get it all out." I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching the people I called family choose her chaos over my silence. Again. That night, I didn't fight back. I just froze her life. Tuition? Gone? Apartment? Locked? Access to me? Cut. But the worst part? They weren't shocked. So now I'm wondering, what kind of family does that to you and still expects you to show up for Christmas? Would you have said something? Or would you have stayed quiet? Like I did. It hadn't started yet. Not really. But I could already hear the cracks. The morning sun had a golden cast that made everything feel softer than it really was. You know the kind, when the air is just warm enough to pretend things are okay, and the breeze tricks you into believing peace might hold. The lake shimmered beside the venue, surrounded by early spring blooms carefully planted by the staff. They did their job. Everything looked perfect. At least from the outside. I'd spent months planning this rehearsal dinner. Every flower, every linen fold, every damn chair sash. I picked it. Not because I wanted attention, God knows that wasn't my style, but I just wanted it to go right. One moment in my life where no one could hijack it. One day where I wouldn't have to dim myself down to keep the peace. But I should have known better. When my parents stood to give their little pre-wedding toast, I was hopeful. Maybe this time, they'd acknowledge me. Not the version they told their friends about. Not the deluded daughter who keeps to herself and doesn't like drama. But me. The woman who built this entire evening from scratch. The one who booked the venue, paid the deposit, followed up with the vendors. All of it. Vernon raised his glass first. That voice of his, smooth and practiced, always sounded more like a company CEO than a dad. He thanked Colton for being the man any father would trust with his daughter's heart. He even cracked a joke about how lucky we were to have Callista's help picking out the tableware. People laughed. And that was it. My name didn't make it into his speech, not once. I looked over at Lorraine. She clapped along with the others, smiling like nothing was wrong. Maybe she really didn't notice, or maybe she did, and decided it wasn't worth bringing up. Either way, the message landed, loud and clear. Be pretty. Be quiet. Don't expect applause for doing the work. I swallowed it like always. Smiled, nodded, sipped my water. That evening, I stayed late to check on a few last-minute things. The catering truck was pulling out just as the sky turned lavender. I lingered under the string lights outside the venue, smoothing the tablecloths one last time, watching the last glimmers of sun reflect on the water. Then I heard the heels. Click, click, click. Callista never walked. She announced her presence. I turned around, and there she was, dressed head to toe in white. Not off-white, not beige. White, a backless, lace-lined, body-hugging number that looked suspiciously bridal. She didn't look at me. She went straight to the mirror in the lobby and adjusted her lipstick. Her hair was curled just enough to look effortless, though we both knew it never was. Guests began trickling in. Whispers followed her like perfume. A distant cousin leaned in toward her, squinting. "Oh, are you the bride?" She laughed, a melodic, polished little laugh. She always wanted to look like me. That one landed like a slap. I felt Mira's eyes find mine from across the room. Her brows furrowed. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Callista sauntered off to find champagne, already collecting compliments. She was a magnet in any room, especially when she wasn't supposed to be. That was her magic. She could turn any spotlight into her own, even when she was uninvited to it. I stood near the fireplace, trying to gather myself. Colton joined me, his hand on the small of my back. He didn't say much. He rarely did during family events. But he squeezed just enough to let me know he saw it too. "You okay?" he asked gently. "I'm fine," I lied. He didn't push. He never did. He knew I'd talk when I was ready. Inside, the gnawing had already started. It wasn't just about the dress, or the comment, or the way she glided through my night like she owned the place. It was all of it, layered, heavy. It was every birthday I let her interrupt, every phone call where she cried, and I dropped everything to come fix her mess. Every time our parents turned to me and said, "Just let her have this one," every "this one" had turned into a lifetime. Later, when I saw the seating chart had been shuffled, Callista's name had somehow been moved to the front center table, directly beside Colton's parents. I didn't ask questions. I knew. She always found a way to reposition herself where people would see her first. It was a pattern, a system. She didn't need to scream to steal. She just took, quietly, repeatedly. The evening wound down with music and half-hearted small talk. Everyone said it was lovely, elegant, just like Callista would have done it. I smiled. I nodded. I told people thank you. But my hands were cold. After the last guest left, I stepped outside alone. The lake, calm and black now, reflected the faint glimmer of fairy lights that lined the wooden railing. The silence wrapped around me, not comforting, but suffocating. I could feel the tears pressing against the back of my throat, not from sadness, but from the weight of always swallowing things I never should have had to. I leaned on the railing, staring at my own reflection, the version of me that was always polite, always composed, always accommodating. It hadn't started yet, not really, but I could already hear the cracks. The door to the venue clicked shut behind me as I stepped back inside, letting the cool air from the lake dissolve behind me. The murmur of voices in the hallway guided me toward the dining area, and just before I reached the entrance, my mother appeared, smiling, wrapped in pearls, and holding a small box. "For you," she said, placing it in my hand. "Something old." Her voice was soft, almost sweet, the kind of tone she reserved for social functions and holiday cards. I gave her a tight smile. "Thanks, Mom." She patted my arm before drifting away into the dining room, already laughing at something Vernon had said. I held the box in my hand for a second before tucking it under my arm and following her in. The bistro had been closed off for our party, the staff bustling between white tablecloths and wine glasses that caught the candlelight just right. Colton was already seated at the far end, deep in conversation with my uncle. Mira waved me over to a seat beside her, and I slid into place, placing the gift box on my lap beneath the napkin. Vernon stood and tapped his glass with the base of his fork. All right, everyone settle down," he said with the confident ease of someone who liked the sound of his own voice in a room that would never challenge him. "We've got ourselves a big day tomorrow, and I just want to say how proud we are of Colton." Colton nodded graciously. "And, of course, of our girls," Vernon added. "Especially Callista, who helped us get the table settings sorted when everything was about to fall apart. Always our stylish lifesaver." The room laughed. Someone clapped. Callista, seated directly across from me, flashed a rehearsed smile and tilted her head just so. As if on cue, she leaned forward, picked up her wineglass, and added with a laugh, "At least Eliza managed to get married before hitting 35. Barely." The table paused. It wasn't long, just a breath, enough to catch the awkwardness, but not long enough for anyone to say anything. Then came the polite chuckles, the kind people give when they know a comment's inappropriate but not their battle to fight. My shoulders stiffened, but I didn't say a word. Mira's hand brushed against my elbow under the table. "Nice one," she muttered under her breath. I smiled without showing teeth. After dinner, back at the apartment, Colton and I were going through small gifts that had been passed to us throughout the day. I remembered the box Lorraine handed me and pulled it from my bag. The paper was neatly folded and taped shut like something out of a catalog. Inside was a silver picture frame with a chipped corner, one I hadn't seen in years. "Oh, wow," I said, mostly to myself. "What is it?" Colton asked, leaning in. "This was in my old room growing up," I said. "Used to hold a picture of me and Mom from a camping trip. I thought she threw it out." As I turned the frame in my hand, my stomach tightened. The photo inside wasn't of me and Lorraine. It wasn't even of me. It was Callista, standing at her high school graduation stage, alone, beaming. Colton looked at it, then looked at me. "Seriously?" I didn't say anything. I slid the photo out and placed it face down on the counter. "You want me to say something?" he asked, his tone even. "No," I said. "She wins if I do." We sat in silence for a while, the only noise coming from the fridge hum and the occasional car outside. I leaned back into the couch and closed my eyes for a second. It wasn't the frame. It wasn't even the photo. It was the message behind it, one more tiny, deliberate reminder that this wasn't my family's celebration. I was a guest, a tolerable one, as long as I didn't make waves. I opened my phone. No missed calls. One new message. Mira, tomorrow's your day. No one else's. Don't let her twist it. I stared at it. I didn't type back. Just read it a few more times and locked my screen. The apartment was quiet again. Colton had stepped into the other room to finish packing a few things. I stood, walked into the bathroom, and faced the mirror. My reflection didn't look tired. It looked calm. Too calm. I picked up my vow notebook from the counter and read through the lines I'd practiced 100 times. They felt foreign now, staged, polished, like the rest of this curated life I was holding up with 2 hands and 0 help. I whispered the first few lines, watching my mouth shape the words. I wasn't nervous about marrying Colton. I wasn't even nervous about the ceremony. I was nervous about the space between the moments, the silences that people like Callista fill with chaos, and the way people like me are expected to endure them quietly. I flipped the notebook shut and stared at my reflection one last time. Tomorrow was going to be beautiful. If I let it. I turned away from the mirror, left the bathroom light on, and walked slowly back toward the bedroom. Colton had fallen asleep on the couch, one leg still half off the edge, remote loosely in hand. The TV glowed silently, casting a soft blue over his face. I didn't wake him. He looked peaceful, and I needed at least one thing tonight to stay that way. I pulled the sheets back and slipped into bed, the vow book still tucked under my arm like it might rewrite itself overnight. Sleep didn't come easily. Not because I was nervous about vows or photos or dresses. It was something deeper. Like I'd been holding my breath since childhood and suddenly noticed how starved I was for air. The hum of the fridge, the occasional car passing outside, it all faded into background noise as my mind spun into places I hadn't visited in years. I was 12 when it started. There was this piano scholarship through the City Arts program. I'd worked so hard for it. Extra hours after school, weekends with Mrs. Crowley, who smelled like peppermint and hand lotion, strict about posture and tempo, but generous with encouragement. When I got the call saying I'd been accepted, I was over the moon. That night at dinner, I could barely sit still. I told everyone between bites of overcooked chicken, expecting at least a high five or some sort of reaction. But instead, Mom exchanged a look with Dad, and then she said the words that still echo whenever I try to celebrate anything. Eliza, sweetie, your sister's having a hard time right now. You know how she gets. Maybe you can take the scholarship next year. Let her have something to focus on this summer. I remember blinking. I didn't even understand what they meant at first. Callista didn't play piano. She didn't even like music. She's going through something, they said again and again. The phrase became a kind of chant over the years, the excuse they wore like a badge, as if being fragile made her sacred. And me? I was the easy one, the one who didn't make waves. That night, I tore up the acceptance letter and threw it in the trash under the sink. And no one ever asked about it again. In college, the patterns continued. I had a second-round interview for a publishing internship I wanted more than anything. I told Callista over dinner. She was quiet. Then, the night before, she called to say she'd helped me by confirming my time with the interviewer. She'd sent the wrong location. I showed up across town to a locked door. By the time I got to the correct address, the interview was over. The coordinator apologized kindly and said they had to move on. Callista just said, "Well, it's just an internship." Another time, she came to my graduation. Mom had framed a photo of me in my cap and gown, standing with Professor Fields. It was a proud moment, one of the few. I'd placed the frame on my dorm desk. She knocked it over, said she was looking for her lipstick. It shattered. She never replaced it, never even acknowledged it. And I never told anyone, because who wants to be the girl whining about her sister at age 22? Now, as the sun broke over the horizon, those moments returned like bruises you'd forgotten until someone touched them. I sat at the edge of the bed, letting my feet rest on the floor, grounding myself. There was a soft knock on the door. Eliza? Lorraine's voice muffled through the wood. Makeup artists running behind. Callista says she can help if you want? I didn't answer right away. Colton stirred behind me, now awake, his eyes catching mine. I'm fine, I called out, then quieter to him. Of course she offered. She doesn't give up, Colton murmured. She doesn't have to, I said. Everyone else gives in. By the time I stepped into the bridal prep room, the energy had shifted. Dresses hung in garment bags, steamers hissed, perfume lingered in the air like static. Mira handed me coffee without saying a word, just a nod that said, I'm here, I see it. Lorraine appeared again, this time with a hopeful smile. She's just trying to help, honey. Don't be so hard on her. I blinked. You mean the same way she helped with the seating chart? Or the photo frame? Lorraine's smile faltered. She's going through something, I finished for her. Right? Isn't she always? She gave me that look I knew too well, the one that said, please don't ruin this. It wasn't a request. It was a warning. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. A few minutes later, the photographer arrived, chipper and oblivious. Bride and sister of the bride photo? I turned to face him, mascara wand still frozen in my hand. Not today, I said evenly. A hush fell over the room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I picked up my veil and walked into the hallway. Tomorrow might be the wedding. But today I started choosing myself. I didn't give her the satisfaction of stopping. I walked right past her, even as the sharp edge of her voice cut through the hum of the hallway like a blade. You look like you're about to cry already. I didn't flinch. I didn't give her my eyes, my words, or even the smallest tilt of my chin. Just one step after another, steady down the corridor, until the door to the courtyard clicked behind me. The scent of lilacs drifted in with the early afternoon air. I stood still, just beyond the arch of climbing roses, hands pressed into my sides. My palms were damp, but not from fear. Not anymore. Just fatigue. Long, deep, quiet fatigue that starts in your spine and moves outward. A few seconds later, Mira slipped through the same door. She didn't say anything right away. Just stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder, as if waiting for my breath to catch up with my pulse. She's planning something, she said finally. I didn't need to ask who. I just nodded slightly. I overheard her last night in the guest room, Mira continued. She was on the phone with someone, told them to make sure the steamer arrived in the morning. Then she said, I'm going to steal this one, just one more time. She looked at me carefully. She's not here to celebrate you, Eliza. She's here to win something. I let out a slow breath and tilted my head toward the sky, watching a sparrow dart across the trellis. I know, I said, but no one else wants to believe that. Mira's face tightened. Because they've decided your job is to be okay. Always okay. That way they never have to deal with how not okay she is. I felt that one hit me like truth always does, quiet and clean and right between the ribs. I didn't answer. There was too much inside me to say anything that wouldn't sound like an accusation, and I wasn't ready to be the angry sister today. Not yet. We stood there in silence for another moment before Mira reached into her clutch. I wasn't going to show you, she said, but you should see this. She handed me her phone. On the screen was a screenshot, green text bubbles against a white background. Callista, keep her busy. I just need 90 seconds at the mic. I stared at it. There was a second message, sent a few hours later. Callista, stay in your lane. Mira's voice softened. She sent it to me by accident, meant to send it to someone else, then doubled down instead of apologizing. A flicker of heat rose in my chest. Not fire. No, I was past that. Just the steady heat of recognition. This wasn't chaos. This was calculation. She wasn't unwell. She was unkind. And she always had been. She's going to grab the mic during the toast, I said, more to myself than to Mira. That's what she meant. Mira nodded. I think so. Thank you, I said. She shrugged. I'm just tired of watching her get away with it. I slipped her phone back into her bag and walked back inside. The The air felt thicker now, buzzing with anticipation and bad intentions. The event coordinator stood near the drink table, double-checking vendor orders. I walked straight up to her. "Hi, sorry to bother you. Just a quick thing to confirm." "Of course," she said, professional and calm. "No unscheduled toasts, right? Like, if someone tries to take the mic, that's not part of the plan?" She glanced at her clipboard. "Only you, Colton, and your maid of honor are on the list. Can you make sure the staff knows that?" I asked. Just in case, something in my voice must have told her everything she needed to hear. She nodded. "Absolutely, I'll handle it." I smiled faintly. "Thank you." Back in the bridal suite, the energy had shifted. The makeup artist had finally arrived, working fast to finish the rest of the girls. I sat in the chair, letting her do her job without interruption. I stared straight ahead in the mirror, ignoring the quiet behind me. Callista stood by the snack table, sipping water from a glass with lemon. She wasn't looking at me, but I could feel the tension humming from her like static. When I stood, she turned slowly, her smile sweet as saccharin. "Eliza," she said, dragging the vowels. "Everything okay? You've been so quiet." I didn't reply. She walked past me toward the hallway. As she passed, she leaned in just close enough to whisper, "You sure you're ready for all this attention? You tend to break under pressure." I turned my head, finally meeting her eyes, but I didn't frown. I didn't glare. I smiled. "Funny," I said. "That's not what you said about me when you needed rent money." Her smile twitched. Before she could respond, I stepped away and walked into the foyer, where Colton was adjusting his cufflinks, waiting for the ceremony to start. "You okay?" he asked. "I will be," I replied. Just then, the coordinator passed by and gave me a small, affirming nod. I glanced back toward the hallway, where Callista had disappeared. Maybe she thought she still had the upper hand. Maybe she thought no one saw through her. But the truth had already started unraveling, not in some explosive scene, but in quiet, deliberate unraveling, the kind that can't be stopped once it begins. I didn't give her the pleasure of a response. After her whisper, I stepped into the bridal suite and let the heavy door close behind me with a soft click. It was quieter in there, but the silence didn't feel peaceful. It buzzed with everything unspoken. I reached for my phone, almost on instinct, needing something solid to hold on to. One new message, from Mom. It was a voice note. I hesitated, staring at it for a beat too long. Then I pressed play. Her voice was soft, carefully pitched, as though she were talking to a skittish animal. "Honey, I just wanted to say, let's not make today about tension. Okay, Callista's under a lot of pressure. She didn't get the life you have. She's complicated. You've always been the strong one, Eliza. Please, be the bigger person, just for today." There it was, the line I'd heard 1,000 ways before, dressed up in different words but always carrying the same weight. She's fragile, you're not. So adjust yourself accordingly. I hit replay. This time, I heard it even clearer. The assumption, the responsibility placed on me, the silent contract that I was expected to uphold, to be steady so someone else could spiral freely. When the message ended, I deleted it. No response, no reaction. I just sat on the edge of the chair and let my jaw unclench slowly. I'm not stronger. I'm just tired. That thought echoed in my head as I walked toward the bathroom, where I knew Callista would be. She always reappeared after moments like that, calm, refreshed, and smug, as if nothing had ever been wrong, because for her, nothing had been. I pushed open the restroom door. She was standing at the mirror, applying lipstick with a precision that felt performative. Her white blonde hair curled in perfect spirals. She caught my eyes in the reflection, didn't flinch. "Eliza?" she said without turning. "I was wondering if you needed help with your veil. You looked a little frazzled earlier." I took 2 steps into the room, not enough to confront, just enough to close space. "Don't touch the mic," I said. "Don't go near the cake. Don't do anything to pull the focus. You want attention? Find another day. This one's not yours." She capped her lipstick and turned around slowly. That smile she wore when she was trying not to laugh, it slid into place like a mask. "Someone's cranky. You can't handle a little sparkle?" I didn't blink. "One wrong move," I said quietly, And this will be the last event you're invited to. I mean that, Callista. Her smile faltered for a second. She wasn't used to pushback, not from me, especially not in front of a mirror, where she could see it from both angles. Are you threatening me? She asked, still playing innocent. I'm setting a boundary, I replied. For once. We stood in silence for a few seconds. Then she stepped aside, as if to clear the way. I didn't walk past her. I turned and left the same way I came. In the hallway, I exhaled slowly. The noise of the guests, the chatter, the clinking glasses, it all sounded muffled. I wasn't sure if it was the room or my head, but either way, I was grateful. Colton was near the entrance to the reception hall, talking to Mira. He looked up as I approached, eyes scanning my face. You good? He asked. For now, I said. Did you talk to her? I did, I answered. She heard me. I walked with him into the ballroom where everything had already been set. White linens, gold-trimmed glassware, tiny place cards lined up with military precision. It was beautiful, almost too perfect, like the kind of place you'd never suspect something was brewing beneath it. Mira slipped to my side as we walked toward the head table. You all right? She asked under her breath. She's not going to back off, I replied, but I'm not either. We sat down. The music was soft, elegant. People had begun finding their seats. Lorraine fluttered past, giving me that polite, worried look, as if my stress might be contagious. You look lovely, sweetheart, she said. I nodded. Thanks, she leaned in. And thank you for not making a scene with your sister. It's already been such a long week. A scene. That's what it was to them. My boundaries, my exhaustion, my hurt, a potential scene. I didn't reply. I just turned away and let my gaze rest on the entrance. Callista walked in 5 minutes later. She wore a shimmer dress that clung like foil, sequins catching every ounce of light in the room. Several heads turned. She smiled broadly and gave a little wave as if she were walking into an awards show. Then she locked eyes with me and didn't break the stare. I didn't look away. She sat at her assigned seat, thankfully far enough from the mic, but she didn't seem bothered. No, she looked pleased, like she had a card up her sleeve, or a backup plan. Mira leaned closer. She's up to something. I know, I said. Then the MC approached the podium, tapped the mic, and welcomed everyone. The evening had begun, and so had the countdown. The mic in my hand felt heavier than it should have. I didn't grip it tightly, just enough to keep it steady. The band had quieted down. The room settled. Eyes were on me, warm and expectant. I scanned the faces briefly. Colton's parents with polite smiles, Mira with that familiar quiet steel in her eyes, even Aunt Joyce, who always smelled like lavender and said the wrong thing at the worst moment. I cleared my throat. The opening lines of my toast were the ones I'd rehearsed, the ones that had lived in my notes app for 6 months. But suddenly, they didn't matter. I adjusted the mic and smiled. It wasn't a wide smile, not the showy kind, just enough to hold myself in place. I won't keep you long, I said. You all know how much this day means to Colton and me. How much we appreciate the love, the time, the effort it took for everyone to be here. This day, this moment, isn't just about a ceremony. It's about building something, choosing something, and choosing it again, every day after. The room was still. Soft lighting warmed the walls. For a fleeting second, I let myself feel it. That maybe I'd found peace again, even if just for tonight. And to those who taught me what strength in silence looks like, I said, the words catching slightly in my throat, not because I doubted them, but because I meant them. I didn't see her rise at first, but I felt it. Callista's presence wasn't subtle. She didn't just stand. She rose like a monologue waiting for stage lights. A second later, her champagne glass arced through the air, a shimmering stream that cut across the dessert table with practiced aim. The glass exploded against a photo frame. A picture of Colton and me in Maui, the one Mira had taken during our engagement trip, shattered beneath wet crystal and sticky liquid. Gasps rang out around the room. Then silence, thicker than anything I'd ever heard. But she wasn't done. Callista strode toward the cake. It was a three-tiered design, white with navy accents, tiny sugar flowers that matched my bouquet. I'd spent hours picking it out. She grabbed the edge of the table, braced her arm, and shoved it forward. The cake tipped, wobbled, then crashed onto the floor with a wet, undignified thud. She turned to me, eyes blazing. Her voice rose, not slurred, not frantic, clear, controlled. "Serves you right, you fake saint, acting like you're better than us. You've always thought you were so above it all. Well, here's your reality check." The room held its breath. No one moved, not even the DJ, who had frozen with his hand over the soundboard. I didn't move either. Mira stood slowly, but Colton reached for her arm and gently pulled her back down. His other hand stayed on the back of my chair. And then, Vernon. He pushed his way through the crowd, stepping around broken glass and cake frosting without a glance at me. His arms reached for Callista. "It's okay," he said, like she was a child who'd scraped her knee. "Let her get it all out. She's just overwhelmed." No one else spoke. Lorraine came forward next, eyes darting nervously between me and the wreckage, and then, just like that, wrapped an arm around Callista's shoulder too. I felt the air shift around me. Not from shock, not anymore, but recognition, confirmation. This is what it had always been. A family who treated dysfunction like drama, and drama like something to be cherished. Callista didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look embarrassed. She stood there, chin slightly lifted, as if she'd dropped some great truth everyone was just too polite to say out loud. I set the mic down on the table, not gently, not loud, just enough for the sound to thud through the speakers. Then I turned to Colton and whispered something only he could hear. "Let's keep the evening going." He looked at me, searching my face. "You sure?" I nodded once. He kissed my hand and stepped aside to speak with the coordinator, who had been standing like a deer in headlights. Soon, the band picked up again, tentatively. Servers moved in quietly, sweeping up shards of glass and cake, acting like this was just another awkward wedding hiccup, like the kind you laugh about years later. Except I wasn't laughing. I walked back to my seat. I didn't speak. I didn't explain. I didn't look at Callista again. Guests began to stir, some whispering, some pretending nothing had happened. The energy shifted uncomfortably, but not enough to collapse the evening. Mira leaned in close. "Eliza, I'm fine," I said. "Later." She knew better than to push. As the evening limped on, people eating around the empty cake table, the band playing something jazzy to fill the silence, I sipped water and stared at nothing. This wasn't the moment I broke. It was the moment I stopped pretending. At the end of the night, after the last song had been played and the chairs had been folded, I walked outside, heels clicking against the patio stones. The lake reflected the moon like it didn't know what had happened. Colton joined me quietly, hands in his pockets. "You okay?" he asked again. "I'll let them believe they won tonight," I said, not bitter, not loud, just tired. Then I turned and walked back into the venue where my name was still on the welcome sign, but not on anyone's lips. The morning after the wedding, sunlight crept through the sheer curtains like it didn't know what had happened the night before. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, bare-faced, pieces of yesterday's makeup still lingering along my lash line like shadows of who I was just hours earlier. Colton moved around quietly behind me, making coffee. Neither of us said much. He knew better than to ask. I knew better than to pretend. My laptop was open, the screen casting its pale glow over the kitchen table. I'd been staring at it for the better part of 20 minutes, cursor blinking on the login page for the student portal. I typed slowly. Username, password, two-step verification. Click. The page loaded, bright and unapologetic. A single tab blinked in the corner. Tuition, spring term. One click, one button, one prompt to confirm. And just like that, the $9,600 deposit I had made a month ago, when I still believed in things like forgiveness and second chances, was gone, voided, pulled back into my account like a rope I should have never let go of. Next tab, rental management portal, lease agreement, co-signer, me, primary occupant, Callista Dane. I clicked freeze access. A pop-up warned, freezing this lease may impact current tenant access. Are you sure? Yes, I was sure. Colton walked over and set a cup of coffee beside me. No words, just the solid weight of support. I looked up, nodded once, then returned to my task. Third and final step: password changes. Every shared login, every backup email. Every forgotten favor I'd given her, just until she got back on her feet. I reset them all. It took 30 minutes, and it was the cleanest I'd felt in years. Later that morning, Mira's name popped up on my phone. I let it ring once, then picked up. "Have you seen it yet?" she asked, without even saying hello. "Seen what?" "Check Instagram. It's everywhere." I opened the app, scrolled for less than 10 seconds, and there it was. Callista. Liv. She was crying. Mascara slightly smudged, hair up in a soft bun, not too perfect, not too messy, just the right amount of chaos to scream, vulnerable. Her voice cracked every few sentences as she addressed her followers, her friends, her carefully curated audience. "I just wanted to be there for her," she said, voice trembling. "But she's always made me feel small. Like nothing I do is good enough. I tried to make peace. I showed up. And this is how she repays me. Freezing my lease. Taking away my education." "I thought she was family." Comments poured in like a broken dam. "You don't deserve this." "Wow, she sounds toxic." "Family trauma is real." "Sending you love, Callie." I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sadness. I felt cold. Then came the crack. An old friend from high school, Jessica H., commented under the post. "Girl, you were bragging about ruining her wedding cake 2 nights ago at the bar." A few more followed. "Wait, isn't this the same sister you said needed to be knocked down a peg?" And then, silence. The story stayed up for about an hour before it vanished. Whether she deleted it or it got flagged, I didn't care. Either way, it was gone. By noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, the family group chat. The one I'd been force-added into years ago, where every passive-aggressive update got sugar-coated with exclamation marks and emojis. "Lorraine. We need to talk. This is spiraling. Callista is distraught." Vernon. "Eliza, please don't be cold." "You're better than this. Better than this." That phrase, that curse. I opened the chat, scrolled, read every word, then I closed it. No reply, no defense, no explanation, just silence. A few hours later, Mira came over. She brought snacks and a bottle of wine, despite it being barely 3 p.m. "You okay?" she asked, towing off her shoes by the door. "Yeah," I said, standing at the sink, rinsing a glass. "Actually, I think I am." She raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "I don't feel triumphant," I admitted. "But I feel like I stopped waiting for them to see me." "That's something." She nodded, curling up on the couch like she lived there. "She'll spin it again," Mira warned. "They'll all pretend it was just a moment, just a mistake." "I know," I said, joining her. "But they can only spin it if I keep dancing in their web." She passed me the wine. "That's poetic. Did you rehearse that?" I smiled, just a little. "No. It's just been marinating for about 10 years. Later that night, after Mira left and Colton was in bed, I sat on the porch alone. The breeze had picked up. It smelled like jasmine from the neighbor's yard and something faintly metallic, rain in the distance. I picked up my phone and opened a new message. To Mira. Now they know what silence really sounds like. I hit send. Then I locked the screen, leaned back, and let the quiet finally wrap around me. Not like a weight, but a release. It had been 2 days since the wedding, and the quiet had become almost suspicious. No group texts, no missed calls, no vague checking-in messages from Mom. It was as if everyone had decided to wait me out, let the dust settle, and hope I'd eventually fold like I always had. But I didn't fold this time. I wasn't pacing or analyzing or wondering if I'd gone too far. I was still. Colton and I were sitting on the couch late that afternoon, eating leftover takeout straight from the containers, the kind of quiet, exhausted dinner that doesn't need words. My phone buzzed once, then again, then several more times. I ignored it at first, assuming it was more chatter from the wedding fallout. But then there was a knock at the door. Colton stood and walked slowly toward it. His steps were deliberate, cautious. He peered through the peephole, then turned his head toward me. "It's her," he said simply. I didn't get up. He opened the door just enough to let his voice through. "What are you doing here?" Callista's voice was already at full volume, no regard for the hallway echoing everything back. "I need to talk to her. She can't just do this. Eliza ruined everything, my housing, my tuition, my future." Colton didn't raise his voice. He didn't even blink. "You don't have access to her anymore," he said. "Not emotionally. Not legally." I had stepped into the hallway by then, barefoot, calm. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. I held an envelope in my hand. Callista's gaze locked onto mine like she expected a fight, but I didn't give her one. I walked up to the door and handed her the envelope. She hesitated, then opened it right there in the doorway. Inside were 2 sheets of paper. One was the official voided lease agreement. The other was the tuition refund confirmation. She blinked, then looked back up at me, mouth slightly open. "This is what letting go looks like," I said softly. "You're free, just not on my dime." She didn't speak. Her hand clenched the papers, and for a second I saw it. The moment it hit her that this wasn't just a punishment, it was a declaration. I wasn't her fallback plan anymore. She stepped back, crumpling the envelope in her hand. "So that's it?" she spat. "You're just done?" I met her eyes without flinching. "I was done the second you destroyed something I loved in front of a room full of people and watched them clap for you after." Callista shook her head like she couldn't believe it. "You think you're so righteous, like you've never hurt anyone." "No," I said, "but I don't build my whole life on it." She stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. No parting shot, no tears, just silence. The door shut behind her with a quiet click. I stood there for another second before Colton reached for my hand. Later that night, we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets. The spring air was cool, the kind that bites at your skin but makes you feel alive. He handed me a cup of tea. "You don't look relieved." "I'm not," I said, "but I feel done." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. It felt heavier than resolution, but lighter than rage. "You know what hurts the most?" I said after a long pause. Colton glanced at me. "I spent years trying to be the peacekeeper, the fixer, the one who held it all together, and I thought that made me good, that being the one who always forgives meant I was doing the right thing." He didn't interrupt, just listened. "But I wasn't being kind. I was being afraid," I said. "Afraid that if I stopped, they'd finally say what they were always thinking, that I was selfish." Colton took my hand again. "You're not selfish." "No," I said. "I'm just finally selfish enough to stop letting them burn me down so they can stay warm." He smiled, not big, just the kind of smile that comes from understanding something deeper than words. The next morning, the air smelled like rain and pine. I checked my phone, scrolling through news updates and a few unrelated emails. And then there it was, a message request on LinkedIn. "Hi Eliza, I run a podcast focused on healing family dynamics and the power of emotional boundaries. A friend forwarded me a clip about what happened at your wedding. I'd love to have you on the show to talk about reclaiming your narrative. Are you open to speaking?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood I didn't have to say yes to everyone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was the whole point. I didn't answer the podcast message right away. I let it sit there, quietly, glowing back at me like a question from a version of myself I hadn't fully stepped into yet. The cursor blinked beneath their simple inquiry. "Are you open to speaking? Maybe, but not yet." I set the phone down and walked outside onto the porch, mug in hand, the ceramics still warm against my palms. The sun was just beginning its slow rise, casting a soft orange haze over the low, rolling hills that lined the edges of Santa Fe. The quiet out here wasn't like the quiet I'd known before. Back home, silence came with pressure, like an invisible hand on your chest, a demand to behave, to concede, to shrink. Here, it breathed with me. It widened when I needed space. It didn't ask for performance. Our house wasn't large. It had no formal foyer, no second-story overlook, no guest suite ready to absorb unexpected visits. It was small and intentional. A place built not to impress, but to hold us, fully, gently. Every paint stroke on the walls was ours. Every plant perched in the windowsill had been chosen by us, carried in by hand, potted with dirt still under our nails. Colton had built shelves for my books using repurposed wood from an old barn door we found at a flea market. I hung wind chimes on the back porch that I used to think were tacky. Now they were one of my favorite sounds. There was no spare key floating in some family drawer. No, just in case, welcome mat. No script for how to host a reunion. It was the first place I'd ever lived that didn't belong to my past, and that meant everything. My workspace was a small corner in the living room, tucked near the window where the light came in golden and slow. From there, I coached women, most in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who had just started realizing that their silence wasn't peace and that choosing themselves didn't mean abandoning anyone. They came to me not for miracle advice or therapeutic monologues, but because I told the truth, blunt, loving, unflinching. I didn't offer sugar-coated affirmations. I taught them the one sentence that had saved me more than once. That no longer works for me. Near my desk hung a framed quote I'd found in a thrift shop the week we moved in. Printed in faded script, on paper browned at the edges, it read, "Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's power." It felt like a lighthouse, a sentence I could wrap my spine around. A few weeks into our new rhythm, Mira sent me a text with a link. "Thought you'd want to see this." It was a regional article from a Seattle blog. The headline made my breath catch, though I couldn't say why. "Seattle woman reclaims power after wedding breakdown, now coaches others to do the same." The photo was of me, from behind, my arms slightly outstretched, speaking to a group of women at a leadership retreat. My hair up, sleeves rolled. No script in hand. The journalist had done their research. They'd gotten the details mostly right. They'd even quoted one of the podcast producers. It wasn't sensational. It wasn't pitying. It was respectful, quietly admiring. The article began to circulate, not viral, not explosive, but steady, organic. Then came the DMs. Women I'd never met writing things like, "Thank you for saying what no one else would." I thought I was the only one. I let them sit in my inbox for a few days before responding. I wanted my words to be clear, not reactive. I didn't need to prove anything to strangers. I only needed to stay true to myself. Then, one breezy Saturday morning, Colton stepped inside from the porch, his voice calm. "There's a car out front." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. "Washington plates." I didn't look. I didn't need to. I poured the rest of my coffee into the sink, set the mug on the drying rack, and stepped outside. The sky was a powder blue, just a few thin clouds tracing the horizon. Vernon and Lorraine stood beside a silver rental sedan, each holding a paper cup from the local cafe, like they were on their way to a weekend getaway. Neither of them moved toward the steps. They waited. When I approached, they both straightened. Vernon nodded first, a tight smile stretched across his face, the kind you offer someone after a long silence you don't know how to break. "Hi, Eliza," Lorraine said, voice soft. "Practiced." Vernon followed, his tone clipped. "We saw the article. We thought—" He stopped there, and Lorraine picked up the thread like a handoff. "We thought maybe we owed you a conversation." I nodded once. "Okay." They didn't ask to come inside. I didn't invite them. We stood by the porch railing, the morning breeze brushing lightly across Lorraine's scarf. Vernon spoke first. "We didn't protect you." He looked down, then back up. "We thought we were, but we weren't. We let too much slide, for too long." Lorraine added, "It's not that we didn't love you, it's just, she was always louder, and you always seemed fine." I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct. When they finished, I nodded again. "I'm not angry," I said. "But I'm also not coming back." Lorraine's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Vernon cleared his throat, then said, almost a whisper, I hope you're happy. I am, I replied. And I was. Lorraine stepped forward and gently opened her arms. I let her hug me. It wasn't warm. It wasn't long. It was just closure. They left 10 minutes later. No scene, no speech, just two people who had finally recognized the consequences of all the silences they'd once let pass. 2 weeks after that, the podcast episode dropped. The producer handled it with grace. No sensationalism, no drama, just the facts. I told the story plainly. No slander, no revenge, just reality. The episode ended with the sentence I'd rehearsed more times than I could count. Family doesn't mean immunity, and healing doesn't always mean reunion. It aired on a Wednesday. By Thursday, I had over 24 emails. That Sunday, Colton and I walked to the local market, like we always did. The air was crisp, the streets sun-drenched. Vendors chatted about dried lavender and handmade mugs. Hope floated like pollen in the spring. We passed a small table selling second-hand wedding decor, chalkboard signs, mason jar centerpieces, cake toppers stacked in a wire basket. I paused, fingertip grazing the edge of a tiny wooden plaque. Colton noticed. "Want to get one for the shelf?" he asked. I thought about it, then I shook my head. "Let's just take the piece instead." He smiled. "Deal." And we kept walking, forward, quiet, free. Sometimes, peace doesn't come with forgiveness, it comes with letting go. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming your voice in a family that tried to silence you. Have you ever been told to be the bigger person while someone else kept crossing the line? Share your story in the comments. We want to hear from you. And if this hit close to home, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more powerful stories just like this one.